At 7:42 on the morning of October 3, 1993, Dorothy Chen stood in front of a condemned apartment building on Reservoir Street, watching a demolition crew prepare to tear it down. 71 years old, 43 years as a seamstress, zero experience in real estate. The building had been scheduled for destruction for 6 months. The city had posted notices. Neighbors had celebrated. Everyone agreed the structure was an eyesore, dangerous, worthless. Dorothy disagreed. She brought something with her that morning. A cashier's check for $8,500, her entire life savings. In her worn leather purse was a purchase agreement she'd drafted herself using a template from the public library. By noon, she'd either own the building or lose everything she had. The city didn't know she was coming. The demolition crew didn't know she existed. The neighbors didn't know a 71-year-old seamstress was about to save the building they wanted destroyed. The property crisis had started in 1989. The commercial real estate market had collapsed. Banks had foreclosed on hundreds of properties across the city. Developers had walked away from projects. Buildings sat empty. The city took possession through tax liens. Most of these properties were worthless, contaminated, structurally unsound, located in neighborhoods nobody wanted. The city couldn't sell them, couldn't maintain them, so they demolished them. Reservoir Street had lost 17 buildings in 4 years. Empty lots replaced apartment houses that had stood since the 1920s. The neighborhood was dying. Property values had dropped to nothing. Families who'd lived there for generations were leaving. Crime had increased. City services had decreased. Everyone understood the pattern. Neighborhood decline was irreversible once it started. Dorothy understood something different. She understood that nothing in economics was actually irreversible. Markets moved in cycles. What collapsed eventually recovered. Timing was everything. And right now, October 1993, timing was perfect. Interest rates had just dropped to their lowest level in 20 years. Commercial property prices were at historic lows. Smart investors were buying. But most investors focused on premium properties in stable neighborhoods. Nobody was looking at Reservoir Street. Dorothy had been watching Reservoir Street for 4 years. She'd seen the foreclosures, the demolitions, the decline. She'd also seen something nobody else noticed. The bus routes hadn't changed. The subway station was still operating. The elementary school was still open. The infrastructure was intact. The neighborhood hadn't actually died. It was hibernating, waiting for someone to believe in it again. She'd grown up in similar neighborhoods. Chinatown in the 1930s. Nobody had money. Buildings were crowded, deteriorating. But families stayed because they couldn't afford to leave. They made it work. Dorothy's family had lived in a 1-bedroom apartment with 7 people. Her father worked in a laundry. Her mother sewed garments at home. Dorothy started sewing at age 9. She was good at it, fast, precise, never wasted material. At 14, she'd started working for a garment factory. $3 per week. She gave it all to her parents. At 18, she'd saved enough to buy her own sewing machine. A Singer, used, $32. She'd set up her own operation, alterations, repairs, custom work, charged reasonable prices, built a reputation. By 25, she was earning $40 per week, more than her father made at the laundry. She'd married Daniel Chen in 1946. He worked for the post office, steady job, decent pay. They'd bought a small house in 1951, $9,200, paid it off in 15 years, raised 2 children, saved every spare dollar. By 1993, they'd accumulated $8,500 in savings. Not much, but enough. Daniel had died in 1991. Heart attack, sudden, unexpected. Dorothy had been devastated. They'd been married 45 years. She'd assumed they'd grow old together, travel, visit grandchildren. Instead, she was alone at 69, with a paid-off house and $8,500 in the bank. She could have done what most widows did, moved in with her daughter, sold the house, lived quietly on Social Security. Dorothy didn't want quiet. She'd spent 43 years sewing, making other people's clothes fit better. She was done with that. She wanted to do something that mattered, something that would last longer than a hemline. The idea had come to her in September 1993. She'd been reading the newspaper, city section, article about condemned buildings. The city was demolishing properties faster than they could process the paperwork. Some buildings were being torn down that shouldn't be. Structural surveys were incomplete. Environmental assessments were rushed. The city was making mistakes. The article mentioned a building on Reservoir Street, 4-story apartment house, built 1928, condemned in 1992, scheduled for demolition in October. The article included a photo. Dorothy recognized the building. She'd walked past it thousands of times. It didn't look condemned. It looked neglected. There was a difference. She'd gone to City Hall the next day, Department of Buildings, asked to see the file. The clerk was surprised. Nobody ever asked to see files on condemned properties. Dorothy insisted. The clerk retrieved the file, 127 pages. Dorothy sat in the public records room and read every page. The building had been condemned for code violations, failed electrical inspection, inadequate fire exits, water damage to 3rd floor. But the structural survey showed the foundation was sound. The load-bearing walls were intact. The roof needed repairs but wasn't collapsed. The violations were fixable. The building wasn't worthless, it was just neglected. Dorothy did calculations. Cost to repair electrical system, $4,000. Install fire exits, $2,800. Fix water damage, $1,500. Replace roof, $6,200. Total repairs, $14,500. If she bought the building for $8,500, total investment would be $23,000. Current market value of similar properties in functioning condition, $65,000. Potential profit, $42,000. But Dorothy didn't want to flip the building. She wanted to own it, rent the apartments, generate income. A 4-story building had 12 units, 2 units per floor on floors 2 through 4. Ground floor commercial space. If she charged $400 per month per unit, that was $4,800 monthly income. Minus expenses, property tax, insurance, maintenance, she'd net approximately $3,200 per month, $38,400 per year, more than she'd ever earned sewing. The problem was financing. She had $8,500 for the purchase. She needed $14,500 for repairs. Banks wouldn't loan money against a condemned building. She needed another way. She'd thought about it for 2 weeks. Then she'd had an idea. Simple, obvious. Ask the people who'd benefit, the potential tenants. Dorothy knew Reservoir Street. She'd lived in the neighborhood for 42 years. She knew families who needed apartments, families who couldn't find anything affordable. The city's housing shortage was severe. Average apartment rent was $850 per month. Most working families couldn't afford that. But $400 per month? That was manageable. She'd made a list, Families she knew who needed housing. 12 families. She'd visited each one, explained her plan. She was buying a building, renovating it, creating affordable apartments, $400 per month. But she needed help financing the repairs. If they'd each contribute $1,200 up front, they'd get first priority for apartments. The $1,200 would be credited toward their first 3 months' rent. 11 families said yes. That was $13,200. Combined with her $8,500, she'd have $21,700, enough to buy the building and complete most repairs. She'd figure out the rest later. Dorothy had submitted her offer to the city on September 28, 1993. Purchase price $8,500. Cash. The city's real estate office was confused. Nobody bought condemned buildings. They asked if she understood the property's condition. Dorothy said she did. They asked if she had legal representation. Dorothy said she didn't need any. They warned her the building might be structurally unsound. Dorothy said she'd reviewed the structural survey and disagreed. The city accepted her offer on October 1st. Closing was scheduled for October 3rd, 10 a.m., but demolition was scheduled for 8 a.m. Nobody had coordinated the schedules. The demolition crew had their orders: tear down the building on October 3rd. They didn't know it had been sold. Dorothy arrived at 7:42 a.m. The demolition crew was setting up heavy equipment, wrecking ball, safety barriers. The foreman was reviewing his checklist. Dorothy walked up to him and explained the situation. She'd bought the building. Closing was in 2 hours. Demolition needed to stop. The foreman called his supervisor. The supervisor called the city. The city's real estate office confirmed the sale. Demolition was canceled. The crew packed up and left. By 8:30 a.m., the building was quiet again. Dorothy stood on the front steps. Her building. She owned it. Closing happened at 10 a.m. Dorothy signed 14 documents, paid $8,500, received the deed. The city clerk congratulated her, seemed genuinely happy someone was saving the building. Dorothy thanked her and left. She had work to do. The repairs started the next day. Dorothy had hired contractors, small operations, immigrants mostly, men who needed work and charged reasonable rates. She'd negotiated carefully: fixed prices, completion deadlines, quality standards. She paid 50% up front, the rest on completion. Professional approach. The contractors respected it. The electrical work took 3 weeks. Complete rewiring, new panel, updated outlets, code compliant. Cost $4,200. Slightly over budget, but worth it. The fire exits took 2 weeks. Steel staircases attached to the exterior. 2 exits per floor. Approved by fire marshal. Cost $2,600. Under budget. Water damage repairs took 10 days. Replace damaged drywall, fix plumbing leak, install new fixtures. Cost $1,400. Under budget. The roof was the biggest job. Remove old shingles, replace damaged decking, install new waterproof membrane, new shingles. 6 weeks. Cost $6,800. Over budget, but necessary. Total repairs $15,000. Dorothy had $21,700. After purchase and repairs, she had $6,700 remaining. She used it for interior work: paint every apartment, replace damaged flooring, install new appliances, make the units livable. By December 1993, the building was ready. Dorothy listed the apartments, $400 per month. The 11 families who'd contributed up front moved in immediately. The 12th unit rented in 1 week. Dorothy collected first month's rent in January 1994, $4,800. Her expenses were $1,600. Property tax, insurance, utilities for common areas. She netted $3,200, more than she'd earned in her best month sewing. And this was passive income. The tenants paid rent, Dorothy collected it. Simple. But Dorothy didn't stop with one building. She'd proven the model worked. Condemned buildings weren't worthless, they were opportunities. She started looking for more. The city had dozens of properties scheduled for demolition. Dorothy reviewed every file, identified buildings that were structurally sound but code deficient, buildings that could be saved. She found another property in February 1994, 6-unit building on Morton Street, condemned for fire code violations. Purchase price, $6,500. Dorothy used her January profit to make the down payment, borrowed $8,000 from a credit union for repairs. 6 more families contributed upfront rent payments. By April 1994, the Morton Street building was renovated and rented. Dorothy now owned 2 buildings, 18 rental units. Monthly income, $7,200. Monthly expenses, $2,400. Monthly profit, $4,800. Annual profit, $57,600. Dorothy was 72 years old. She was earning more than most corporate managers, and she was just getting started. The pattern repeated. Dorothy bought condemned buildings, renovated them, rented them affordably. Each building generated profit. She reinvested the profits into more buildings. By 1996, she owned 7 buildings, 64 rental units. Monthly income, $25,600. Monthly expenses, $9,200. Monthly profit, $16,400. Annual profit, $196,800. Dorothy Chen had become a real estate investor, not through inheritance, not through lucky breaks, through careful observation, precise calculation, and stubborn belief that condemned didn't mean worthless. She'd started with $8,500 in savings. 3 years later, her portfolio was worth over $600,000. The neighborhood noticed. Reservoir Street was changing. Dorothy's buildings looked maintained. Tenants stayed. Families felt stable. Other property owners started renovating their buildings, matching Dorothy's standards. Within 5 years, property values on Reservoir Street had increased 200%. The neighborhood was recovering. But Dorothy's success created problems. Other investors noticed. Speculators started buying condemned buildings, flipping them for profit, displacing long-term residents. Gentrification accelerated. Rents increased. The families Dorothy had helped were being priced out of the neighborhood. Dorothy saw what was happening. She didn't like it. She'd built her portfolio to create affordable housing, not to enable displacement. She made a decision in 1999. She would stop expanding, lock in her current portfolio, never sell, keep rents affordable permanently. Her buildings would be a buffer against gentrification, stable housing for working families in a neighborhood that was becoming unaffordable. She formalized the arrangement, established a nonprofit corporation, transferred ownership of all her buildings to the nonprofit. The nonprofit's charter specified that rents couldn't exceed 30% of area median income. The buildings couldn't be sold, ever. Dorothy appointed a board of directors, community residents, people she trusted, people who understood the mission. The nonprofit continues operating today, 27 years later. Dorothy Chen died in 2018, age 96. She'd spent her final 25 years managing the portfolio she'd built, never retired, never stopped working. She'd shown up at her office every day until she was 95, reviewed maintenance requests, approved repairs, talked to tenants. Her funeral drew more than 400 people, tenants, former tenants, community members, people whose lives she'd changed, not through charity, through opportunity. She'd given families stable housing at prices they could afford, let them build their lives without constant housing insecurity. That stability mattered more than any social program. The nonprofit manages 47 buildings now, 312 rental units, housing for approximately 800 people. Rents remain affordable, below market rate. Families stay for decades. Children grow up. Grandchildren grow up. Multi-generational housing stability created by a 71-year-old seamstress who refused to believe condemned meant worthless. Dorothy never sought recognition, never publicized her work, never promoted herself. She just bought buildings, fixed them, rented them affordably. Practical work, necessary work. Nobody paid much attention until she died and people realized what she'd built, a housing empire worth $18 million that she'd created from $8,500 in savings and 25 years of careful reinvestment. The local newspaper ran her obituary, 3 paragraphs, standard format, name, age, survived by children and grandchildren. One line mentioned her real estate work, longtime property owner and community advocate. That was all. No detail about how she'd started, what she'd accomplished, how many lives she'd changed. But the community remembered. They organized a memorial, renamed a street, Dorothy Chen Way. Small gesture, appropriate. She'd have been embarrassed by anything larger. The nonprofit board commissioned a plaque, installed it on her first building, the one on Reservoir Street. Simple brass plate. Dorothy Chen, 1922 to 2018. She believed buildings could be saved. Real estate schools don't teach Dorothy's method. Business schools don't study her model. She didn't fit conventional frameworks, didn't maximize profit, didn't exit at peak value, didn't follow any standard investment strategy. She did something different. She built permanent, affordable housing in a market that makes permanence impossible. And she did it profitably. That combination, social mission and financial sustainability, shouldn't work according to conventional wisdom, but it did. Her strategy was simple: buy distressed assets nobody wants, repair them efficiently, charge rents that working families can afford, reinvest profits into more properties, never sell, never cash out, build permanent community wealth, not personal wealth, community wealth, assets that serve people across generations. She understood something most investors don't. Buildings last longer than people. If you own property, you're responsible for what happens to it after you're gone. You can sell to the highest bidder, let market forces determine outcomes, or you can structure ownership to serve community needs permanently. Dorothy chose permanent. That choice continues affecting lives 25 years after she stopped actively managing the portfolio. The families living in Dorothy Chen's buildings today don't know her story. Most never met her. They pay rent to a nonprofit, fill out maintenance requests, live their lives. They don't think about the 71-year-old seamstress who stood in front of a condemned building in 1993 and decided it was worth saving. But they benefit from that decision every month when rent is due and their payment is $600 instead of $1,400. That difference, $800 per month, lets them save money, take their kids to doctors, fix their cars, invest in education, build stable lives. Dorothy Chen proved that one person with $8,500 in savings and a stubborn refusal to accept conventional wisdom could change an entire neighborhood. Not through activism, not through political organizing, through the boring work of property management. Buy buildings, fix them, rent them affordably, repeat. Simple actions, sustained over decades, creating permanent change. Her children tried to tell her story while she was alive, suggested she write a memoir. Dorothy refused, said nobody would care about an old woman buying buildings. They tried convincing her, said her story inspired people. Dorothy said if people needed inspiration, they should just start working. Talk was easy, action mattered. Buy something, fix it, make it useful. Stop waiting for permission or perfect conditions. Just start. That advice remains her clearest legacy, not the buildings, not the nonprofit, the permission she gave people to just start, with whatever they had, however much or little. Start solving problems you see. Don't wait for someone else. Don't assume you need credentials or connections. Need attention to detail, persistence, willingness to learn. Dorothy had those qualities, so do millions of other people. They just don't believe it matters. Dorothy proved it matters. $8,500 in savings mattered. 71 years of life experience mattered. Decades of sewing, precision work, attention to detail, never wasting material, that mattered. Skills transfer. Experience transfers. Age is an advantage if you let it be. Dorothy understood real estate better at 71 than most 30-year-old MBAs. Not because she was smarter, because she'd lived through market cycles, seen neighborhoods change, understood that patience and timing beat speed and leverage. The buildings Dorothy bought between 1993 and 1999 will outlast everyone reading this. They're solid structures, well-maintained. The nonprofit has capital reserves for major repairs, professional property management. The buildings will stand for another 50 years, probably longer, housing families who don't exist yet, providing stability across generations. All because a seamstress refused to accept that condemned meant worthless. If this story moves you the way it moves us, don't just remember it, act on it. Look at your own community. What's broken that everyone assumes can't be fixed? What's been written off that still has value? What would you attempt if you believed your experience and attention mattered more than credentials or capital? Dorothy Chen stood in front of a condemned building at 71 and saw possibility where everyone else saw failure. That vision changed 800 lives directly, changed an entire neighborhood indirectly, changed how a city thought about condemned properties. All from one woman who'd spent her life sewing and decided she wanted to do something that would last. You don't need her exact circumstances, you need her perspective. That the experts aren't always right, that conventional wisdom often misses opportunities, that ordinary people doing careful work create extraordinary outcomes, that age and experience are advantages, not limitations, that starting small doesn't mean staying small, that $8,500 and stubborn persistence can build an $18 million legacy. Dorothy Chen would tell you to stop reading and start doing. Find your condemned building, your overlooked opportunity, your problem everyone assumes is unsolvable. Study it, calculate, plan, then act. Not perfectly, just carefully. Results compound over time. What seems impossible at 71 becomes reality at 96, if you give it 25 years of consistent attention. Small work, sustained work, that's how neighborhoods are saved, not through grand initiatives, through one person, one building, one decision, repeated until it becomes permanent. Dorothy proved it. The 312 families living in her buildings right now prove it. The children growing up with housing stability prove it. Legacy doesn't require scale, it requires permanence. Build something that outlasts you. Dorothy did, so can you.